Our scripture reading this morning is taken from Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 31, and also Proverbs 25, verse 11. And I'll be reading off the screen. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and he created them. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. And Proverbs 25, verse 11. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a ruling rightly given. Yeah. And I'd now like to invite Tim and Andrea Humphrey up onto the stage. I'll just introduce them a bit. They're a happily married couple from Guildford Church. They're passionate about music, and they're trying to make it as a concert pianist and an opera singer as well. And they both studied at the Royal Academy of Music. So I hope that we'll be blessed by their item now.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say, I had a situation once where I felt slightly awkward about correcting a certain lady when she was calling me Matthew. So she ended up calling me Matthew for several years after. I'm Tom. It says I'm Tim. And this is my wife and I. And we've got a couple of pieces to perform for you today. The first is from Mendelssohn's Oratorio, Elijah, which is a truly wonderful piece of music. It's very long, and it tells the story of Elijah. And this particular song, or aria, is when Elijah sets up the test, you'll remember, to prove if Baal or the God of Israel is God. And the priests of Baal have just failed to set their altar alight. And so he then turns to God and sings this.
God, our faith.
And the next piece, we're doing them in the opposite order to the program, is, you'll recognize it, Panis Angelicus, text taken from Thomas Aquinas. It's a beautiful piece of music which I love very much and wanted to bring today.
Thank you, Tom. Maybe I should tell you one detail about Tom and Raya. I actually met him before he was an Adventist. But really the journey with him started about a few months earlier. And it's interesting how God works. I remember, let me tell you first, one of the ways I like to study these days is through podcasts. I drive my car, I download the stuff from the university's lectures, and I listen to that stuff. And one day I was driving, and the word Byzantium came to my mind. And I was kind of perplexed by that, because I realized I know nothing about Byzantium, even though I have a history degree myself. And I felt a bit embarrassed by this, so I decided that I should download some lectures and just inform myself about Byzantium. And I downloaded about 20 hours of lectures on Byzantium. And I was so thrilled. It took me a couple of weeks to listen through all that lectures, and I was so thrilled. You know, when this sheer joy when a new knowledge comes to you, you know, and you just like it. I was so happy that I decided to listen all 20 hours again. And then after I listened, I kind of realized, well, I never bothered to remember the details, the names, and the dates. So I did it a third time. So I listened about 60 hours of stuff on Byzantium. And then I've done it, and I thought, well, that's it. You know, I didn't do it for nothing else, just a sheer pleasure. A few months later, I had the opportunity to meet Tom. And Tom, after a little chat, invited me to go to his house to visit him, which I gladly accepted. And then the next day, as I was coming to the stairs and about to knock on his door, then I suddenly realized, I had this thought, what on earth I'm going to talk about to this guy? I know nothing about opera. I know nothing about music, you know, in a sense that he does. And I really was worried. Anyway, I knocked on the door. He invited me into the living room. And there, you know, you look around what's going on here. And then there was a book set that wide. And it said Byzantium on it. Man, did we had a good chats. We met on a weekly basis, and we loved to talk about Justinian, our favorite general Belisarius, and all the others. And it's interesting how things work out, isn't it? You never know what's going to happen. And here he is, and thank you for coming, for accepting the invitation, and Uriah as well, to sing for us here today. There are some wonderful traditions and institutions in the United Kingdom that people hold dear. Like NHS, isn't it? Everybody likes NHS. A BBC is a national institution. And then comes this humble a tradition or institution, a garden shed. We have apparently about 11.5 million garden sheds in this country, and we spend 60 million hours weekly in the garden shed. Garden shed is a place where many things were written, invented, and even Nobel Prize won. George Bernard Shaw had a garden shed, Thomas Dylan, Virginia Woolf. Even the Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was recorded in the garden shed. Then there's this tradition that we call DIY. Over the weekend, the thousands of over-optimistic men who in their desire to make their wives proud, immerse themselves in way overreaching projects that end up in 99,000 emergency hospital admissions per year. Well, one Sunday morning, a few months ago, I decided that I should follow the tradition and do some DIY. I needed my adjustable spanner. I looked in my garden shed, and I could not find it. Now, this was not a surprise to me, because I have been known to strategically place my tools around the house, rather than keep things neatly in a toolbox. And that makes perfect sense, if you think. I tend to leave a radiator key on the radiator. And since my wife frequently wants to arrange pictures on the wall, my hammer tends to be leaning somewhere near the wall. A screwdriver, a tester, and the pliers are more likely to be found in the fuse box. Well, as I said, I was neither surprised nor annoyed when I could not find my spanner. But I was determined not to give up this time. I declared to myself that I would not stop until I finally find my adjustable spanner. So I searched for the spanner the whole day. That night I went to bed perplexed, but still determined to find it. Around 2 a.m. in the morning, I woke up with eyes wide open, Airing cabinet, I screamed in my head. I got up, I removed all the towels from the airing cabinet, but the spanner was not there. Monday, on and off, search continued without any results. Tuesday, I made careless and potentially grave mistake. I asked my wife if she had not misplaced my spanner. She glanced at me with this only the married man knows look, which said, "Don't you ever ask me that question again." Wednesday, nothing. Then on Thursday morning, something strange happened. While searching for my spanner, I realized something. I realized that I forgot why I was looking for the spanner in the first place. So for the rest of the week, I tried to remember what I was searching for and why I was doing all this. Sometimes the life of the churchgoer can resemble this illustration. For months, years, we attend the church, we listen to sermons, we glean through the finer points of theology, go to every church, every Sabbath to church, we pray, and sometimes in our journey of life, we may stop and wonder, what are we doing here? Where am I going? Shouldn't I be doing something else? When I was still an intern, I remember the statement given to me by the senior pastor. He said, "Pastor thinks of looking for another job at least twice a year." And this statement still resonates in my mind after so many years. I don't know about you, but I have these moments from time to time. Last time it happened in April of this year. After listening a series of sermons that contain a bountiful reference to conspiracy theories about Illuminatis, Masons, Jesuits, Pope Francis, New World Order, I remember I was driving home one night and I thought to myself, do I really want to be part of all this? Is this what the good news is about? I realized I had a crisis. Fortunately, just like in Tom's case, God indeed works in mysterious ways. It just happened so that the very next morning, I flew away with my family for an Easter holiday. I cannot explain or emphasize enough to you how important this was. I dread to think what would have happened if this was just another working day. And as it happens on the holidays, you tend to spend time thinking. You spend a lot of time thinking, but also on holidays, I spend a lot of time just watching the world passing by. Especially I like to watch people passing by. So while on holiday one early morning, I went to the marketplace in my wife's country of Macedonia, a bustling market where East literally meets the West. An interesting place. I sat there on the low wall, and I enjoyed observing traders setting up their stalls early in the morning and shoppers haggling over the price of tomatoes. As I was watching the crowd, my eyes caught a sight of a little boy and his mother, just 15 feet away from where I was sitting. And it was a beautiful sight. 6 or 7-year-old boy and his mom. They were setting up their little square table, selling the colorings for the Easter eggs. The boy was dressed in the worn-out clothes, but he was clean and tidy. And you could not help yourself but notice his pride and excitement. This was the day, and he was prepared to savor this moment when he will become a proper trader. I could not hear the conversation, but his mom seemed to ask him at one point to be a little bit on his own and watch the stall while she goes and picks up another box. Or you should have seen him. He buttoned up his shirt at the neck and he adjusted his hair. And he stood there waiting for his first customer with his proud smile, relishing to be in charge of that stall. I delighted in observing his pure innocence, his optimism, this beautiful boy with such a positive look on life. However, in a moment, just as I was watching him out of the blue, a much darker thought descended on my mind, like the sudden cold wind in a dark night. You see, that little boy was a gypsy, a Romani boy. You may think you know something about the gypsies of Eastern and Southern Europe and their plight, but some of you cannot even imagine the scale of discrimination these people are going through right now in the 21st century. These people are often brutalized, ostracized, ghettoized, discriminated against by majority population. These are the people who live in abject poverty. Just a few months ago on a telly, I watched the report about the Romas being lynched, like in the 1930s style, in a deep south in Hungary and France. And nobody was even persecuted for that crime. The prejudice against Roma people runs so deep that even a good average Adventist there will start with sentence like, yes, it's true they are persecuted, and then they would come, but. And they would talk about how they brought all this upon themselves, being the thieves, cheats, even baby snatchers. I looked at this beautiful boy and I thought, oh, poor boy, you don't even know what world you are growing into. This innocence, this pride, beauty, that unrestrained hope will one day be crushed by a bully, by a hate monger, right-wing nationalist, a concerned citizen, a skinhead. I felt so sad for this little boy. As I was driving back to Croatia from Macedonia in the night, I kept thinking about this boy. I wished I did something. Then I knew what I should have done. I just didn't think quick enough. If I could have returned the clock, I would have taken 20 pounds out of my pocket. I would come to him and I would have brought all the egg paint that was on his desk. I would have stroked his little head and I would have told him how wonderful, how hardworking boy he was. As I continued to drive through the night, I asked myself why I had this urge within me. What would this gesture really make any difference for that little boy? And the answer to these questions, and one mentioned earlier, I found in a particular story in the Bible. This is a beautiful, gentle story, full of tenderness that I find for you, that maybe you will see an unusual place in the scriptures. Place where we usually expect other themes to read about. Place where Adventists and evangelicals are more likely to come to grind their axes with evolutionists rather than to look for an affectionate love story. And I read that text in Genesis 1:26 and the part of 31. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and over all the wild animals and over all the creatures that move along the ground. God saw all that he made, and it was very good. This story of creation is familiar to us. But within this story, there is a deeper, even more beautiful story to behold. Proverbs 25:11 says, a word aptly spoken is like apples of gold in setting of silver. In the Talmud, ancient rabbis use this verse to refer to a deeper meaning of the text presented. On the surface, the text is like a silver dish, beautiful and true. But if you look deeper, you start seeing golden apples in it. And this is a very important lesson for us Adventists to learn today. Because if we are not careful, we can end up in a blind alley, just as our forefathers, Adventist pioneers, did 140 years ago. In the middle of the 19th century, we discovered the Sabbath and we discovered 10 Commandments. We were so excited and absorbed discovering the truth, and we were so focused, dedicated, that we forgot the underlying beauty of these doctrines, which is faith, Christ, and grace. So much so we forgot that we had to relearn the doctrines of righteousness by faith. And even today, we suffer from that fallout as we observe how some of our church members struggle with the issue of perfection, grace, and mercy. Likewise today, Genesis 1 and 2 is embraced with an equally single-minded, narrow passion, just as the Sabbath and the 10 Commandments were a century and a half ago. We seem to see Genesis 1 only as a creation account that has to be fiercely guarded from those who want to erode our truths, be it an evolutionist or some liberal theologian. But in doing so, we are in danger to repeat the same mistake. We are in danger to miss the golden apples in a silver dish. Yes, Genesis says something about creation of the world, but it also says much, much, much more. To begin with, yes, Genesis is a piece of poetry. People are spooked about this. They would rather see it as a scientific paper. But you should remember that unlike today, poetry in those days did not only have an aesthetic value, but it also a functional one. Rhyme helps us to remember, and remember accurately. None of you can recall a paragraph word for word from any point of your schooling, but we all can remember the rhymes and songs that we learned in our childhood, and we don't make even a single mistake as we sing them. Still, Genesis 1 is also an aesthetic piece of poetry, written to inspire, to enthuse, to encourage, to bring comfort. Writer of the Genesis, Moses, was writing it to the people similar to the people to whom the little boy in a Macedonian marketplace belonged to. Just as today's gypsies, Israelites were regarded as a nuisance, an unwanted brood, a runt of humanity. Egyptians thought of them to be good for nothing except for punishing work. To them, they were pests who bred uncontrollably, and they had to be controlled. It is always good to remember when Genesis was written down. It was written at the moment when these worthless former slaves were rejected and abandoned to wander in the wilderness. Genesis was first written to them, and then to you and me. And you can also see this in the way the Bible was written. Did you notice the difference between the biblical story and the myths and the stories that circulated among the Israelites in other heathen cultures? Although there are some similarities between Genesis story and other creation stories around at the time, there is something highly unique and unusual about biblical creation account. If you look at these other accounts from Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, and Egyptians, you see that mankind is almost like at best, some sort of accident, like a third child in a family. You know how it goes. You have one child, and if it's a boy, you think it would be good to have a girl, and if it's a girl, you kind of plan for a boy. And then you complete the set, and then years later, you go on a short break to Rome, and then a third one comes, isn't it? Something like that. At the best, in those myths, it's kind of accidental almost. It was not really that passionately thought through, but it happened. And then at worst, humanity is a product of some catastrophe, some terrible disaster. I read about Assyrian god Marduk. He killed another god, slayed him, and as he slayed, the blood spilled, and this is how the humankind came about. And then he decided, well, they will work for us. That's your account from the Assyrians. However, in Genesis, there is something beautiful happening. After creating a humankind, God says, God saw all that he made, and it was very good. In other words, God told Israelites that they were not a statistical mistake. He told them that he willed them into existence because he loved them, and he deliberately made them. Through the story of creation, God reassures these wretched people how important they are, that they are beautifully made, that they are full of potential. Just remember where and when they were reading these words for the first time. They were in the desert, in no man's land, wondering about their predicament and the choices they made. They are not sure whether it's better for them to stay in Egypt as slaves or to be in this desolate landscape. Only when I read these verses of Genesis 1 within its historical and cultural context, do I realize why and what I wanted to do for that little boy in the marketplace. I realized from this example in Genesis that what I wanted to create a memory for this little boy. A memory for this little boy that would maybe, just maybe, help him to get through when evil thugs step on him in an attempt to destroy his happiness and innocence. I hope that the memory would sustain him through difficult times in his life and help him to understand that there will be always someone who thinks the world of him, who sees how precious he is. God also told these battered former slaves that the future before them is not necessarily going to be all roses, but he did tell them that he would be with them. And it's important here to know this, because God did not promise to remove uncertainty from us, but he did promise that he will be with us as we go through uncertainty of life in this sinful world. You know, we all remember that special advice that we either receive from parent or a teacher or a lecturer. We all have this moment, and I remember one here at Newbold. I remember what was said, but I cannot remember the lecturer, so I can't give him credit right now. But I remember one lecturer said, if you got the doctrine of sin wrong, you are most likely to get all other doctrines wrong. If you got the doctrine of sin wrong, you most likely don't understand the others as well. And I think this is something that most Christians struggle with, because we talk how sin is crippling and debilitating, and yet we try to ride it. We try to kind of control it. We Christians underestimate the power of sin. You know, I'm sorry if I hurt you by this, but we all talk about that. You know, people think that if they go to church, if they pray, if they do all the right things, that somehow they will escape that uncertainty. But you know what? The truth is this, that you have the same chance of being hit by a car crossing that road as the atheist does. You indeed may improve your odds slightly by eating, by leading a good lifestyle. You may actually, even if you take care of, how you take your risks, you may kind of improve your odds. But the bottom line is that one of the most debilitating things about sin is that it doesn't make sense. And our brain tries to make sense because our brain is an analytical machine. In our brain, 1 and 1 always has to be 2. 2 and 2 is always 4. And we cannot make sense, and we try them to work. And this is why many of us like so much the conspiracy theories. We are infatuated by them because it's so attractive. It's so attractive because, it's much easier to believe when something bad happens in the world. There are this group of people with highly intelligent, but with a diabolical mind who kind of pull the levers of power. This is much more beautiful to believe in than to kind of believe that, it just happened because people are stupid. Albert Einstein was right when he said that in our corner of universe, the most abundant substance is the hydrogen and human stupidity. And we try that by catching on to these conspiracy theories, we somehow think that if if it's controlled, then we also feel it's controlled by us by proxy. We talk about surrendering, but we really don't want to surrender. We want to ride. We think that we can control, but let me tell you, there are some cancers that you can beat by eating a healthy diet, but there are also some cancers that just happen. Bad luck. And whether you are an atheist or whether you are Christian, it may happen in equal odds to you and to them. And if you understand that theology of sin, what sin does, then you are likely to understand the rest. God knows this. So what he does, he knows that while you live on this earth, uncertainty reigns. You will never escape this while you are in the sinful world. God knows this, so he creates a memory for you. Instead of illusionary and superficial sense of control that you get through conspiracy theories and I don't know what, God says, surrender to me. Trust me. Have faith in me. He says, I have created you, and what I have created is very good. You are not a reject, a runt, a piece of driftwood floating in a storming ocean. I have plans for you. And when things go really bad, remember that I have created you, and you are mine, says Isaiah 43:1. He told them the story, not only how he created them, but also that he created them with the joy and passion. God wanted to create a memory for them, a memory which culminated in creation of the Sabbath. And you can recall the instruction of the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day. Is this not a beautifully appropriate gift? What do you give someone who knows nothing but never-ending work the slave has to endure? You give him a Sabbath. So he created the memory for them, a day when they will be reminded, no matter how tough life can be, that there is someone who works tirelessly to secure their future. A memory that will help them in the time when oppressor or the burdens of this life press hard on them. Is this not the essence of a good news? Is this not what we are called to? To remind them of this hope and also to create memories for each other that will sustain us in time of trouble. Genesis is also a story of a compassionate and caring God. Genesis tells us something about the world, how the world was created, and this is your silver dish. But Genesis is also a story of compassionate and caring Creator and the loving relationship He wants to have with His creation, and these are the golden apples in the text. Genesis is the story of creation, but even more, it is the story of the Creator. Genesis and the little boy remind me why we are here today. We are here to bring the good news to this little boy and others like him. We are called to create memories for the people around us. Love him or loathe him, but the Pope Francis said one thing in the Congress in the USA a few weeks ago. He said, we see refugees like numbers, but we should see them as faces, individuals looking for hope for themselves and those they love. We are all refugees in search of better home. We all have it tough from time to time. There will be time when we will feel unwanted, smaller than a grain of sand. One day you may find yourself staring through the hospital window, watching the world passing by as you feel stuck and left behind after hearing the bad news. You may feel inadequate, humiliated, abandoned. The good news is that God has created and still creates memories for the moments like these. He reminds you that He created you, that He willed you into existence, that you are precious to Him. And when it is difficult for you to see over the horizon, He created the memories like Sabbath for you, so that you have time to pause and reflect and see how things will be one day. God says, impress these words of mine on your heart and on your soul. In the Greek mythology, the gods hated humanity. They hated it so much that god Zeus sent a gift to the most beautiful woman. Her name was Pandora. He sent her a box with a gift. So she thought so. And as Pandora took the gift, she opened the gift, the box. And you know the story. All ills of the world sprang out of that box. And this is how we got into mess. But the other part of the story maybe you have missed. She tries to close the box. And finally she did manage. But everything escaped out of the box. And there was only one thing left in the box. And that thing in the box that was left was hope. I wonder who put that hope in that box. Maybe that unknown God they were talking about. We are invited to create memories of hope for others. Memories of hope that will carry people through their lives. We are called to tell this good news about the one who created them, who see them so precious. So I pray that you may remember these words in both good and bad times. May you know that hope never dies. May you know that although you can see things dimly, like through the mirror right now, that He holds the key of our past, present, and the future, and that He has everything under His control. May you find a way to share these things in faith with people you touch in your everyday lives. May God bless you. Amen.